We are live now, and we are
Okay.
here with Yuval, right?
Yuval,
Introduce
yes.
yourself. Introduce yourself. You're our
Okay, so
favorite Zionist.
yeah, so I'm an Israeli Zionist currently residing in Australia, an atheist. Uh, Atheist Republic was kind enough to host me for I think 3 times by now.
We should have you more
Uh,
often.
yeah, you should. Why not? I get publicity. Hi, Suha Barakat is here. Very good.
Yes, Soha is here.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, I have to say, I'm gonna pay special attention to Sua's comments because I'm sure she has a lot to say.
Okay.
Me personally,
All right. Well,
hi,
introduce.
yeah,
So you are Israeli and you're Zionist.
yeah,
And how you've been out of Israel for how long?
yeah, 14 years now.
14 years. Right.
Yes, yes.
But do you miss Israel?
I miss certain things. I miss my friends. That's the thing I miss the most. I miss the good food. No offense, Australia, but Israeli food is something I still miss.
Right.
A lot of the Israel that I miss is not there anymore, to be honest. Regrettably.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. So, however, we still want the best for Israel. I am also a Zionist, so we have
Hey.
we are both Zionist atheists, right? Before we get into the topic of Netanyahu versus Israel and whatever is happening right now, I just want to give everybody where me and Yuval stand, so people could take our positions with a grain of salt and know where our biases are. So you could use that as a way to judge what we're saying, whether our biases is having an effect on that or not. Okay. So as I mentioned, we're both Zionists. We're both atheists. We're both, and correct, you will, don't let me, like, if I say anything and you disagree, tell me, like, no, Armin, actually, I don't agree with that. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
We both believe, both want secularism in Israel, right?
Absolutely.
We both think Netanyahu is horrible for Israel.
Bad for
We
Israel, yes.
very bad for Israel. We both think that far right groups and religious extremism is creeping more and more in Israeli politics, right?
Absolutely.
We both want the best for. We want peace and prosperity for Israeli people and Palestinian people.
And Palestinian people. Yes.
Right. We want, yeah. And we want more rights and freedom for Palestinian people. Correct?
Yes. Hi, Narumi. Yes.
Right. And we both agree that Hamas and Hezbollah are disgusting, vile organizations.
Absolutely.
That anything that we say to criticize Netanyahu and his administration is not by any means an endorsement or justification for anything Hamas or Hezbollah or any other groups
Absolutely.
like them do.
No.
Whatever they do or whatever the position they have, we call that out. Nothing we say here justifies anything to do. I especially hate the people who hate the position of people who argue against Netanyahu's bad policies, which is correct, but then go around and say, well, can you blame Hamas? I always answer, yes, I can blame Hamas.
Yes,
okay?
Absolutely.
Yes, I could criticize Netanyahu's bad policies, and I will not use those bad decisions as a way to excuse anything Hamas and Hezbollah does. Yes, I can still blame Hamas, even with the bad decisions that Netanyahu is making. All right, so you agree with all of that, right?
I agree with all of that. Hi, Queen Fabi.
Yay.
I agree with all of that.
Okay, good. So we want to start with looking at the events that are happening and see what you have been telling me, Yuval, has been very interesting and eye-opening about Netanyahu's role in all of this, right? And again, every time we mention Netanyahu's role in any of this, we're not excusing Hamas's role on any of this, okay? We're not. Don't throw but Hamas. Like we already clarified that, I hope, okay? So I want to look at the policies of this administration and how has it affected all of this and how it has been a disaster for both Israeli people and Palestinian people. And then also after we finish going over all that, then we look at bigger picture, long term, how the decisions been, the policies and decisions has been a disaster for peace and prosperity for both Palestinian and Israelis. So I don't know if you want to get started with going back a few days and talking about.
Well, I'll go back. I'll go back a few days as far as I know. By the way, because I don't live in Israel, I might, and if there are Israeli commentators here, they can correct me on fine details. I'll go back on the last few days. I'll go back actually a few weeks briefly, just so people get the context. Israel, in the context of Netanyahu, Israel has now gone out of its fourth election. Netanyahu couldn't form a coalition, and now there was a coalition that started to be formed against Netanyahu, which included both right-wing parties, center parties, and left-wing parties trying to join together and form a coalition to oust Netanyahu. As this happened, as this coalition was forming, several things happened that rose up the tensions in Jerusalem. One thing was a police decision to put now is Ramadan. A lot of Muslims are coming to Al-Aqsa to pray. Police decided to put barriers in the Damascus Gate. That's a gate that's leading to the old city of Jerusalem, to prevent people from gathering in the gate. This rose some tensions. Then there was an attempt, an eviction to evict Palestinian families from land that legally is owned by a Jewish organization, and that also happened in Ramadan. And again, this also stirred up tensions. And then part of the tension also happened in Al-Aqsa, in what the Muslims call Haram Sharif, and we would call the Temple Mount. So you had rioters there gathering stones, and then you had the police coming into Haram Sharif. This is also in the area. This is also bound to stir up tension. And wait. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to clarify what you're saying.
Yes.
Because a lot of people, you're throwing out a lot of names that people are not familiar with, right?
Yes.
So in the timing of what you're saying is very important. Okay, so there's two things happening at the same time. Netanyahu, every time he seems to be losing his position, every time he seems to be being kicked out, he finds a way to stay in power, right?
Yeah.
And
yes.
He's so very clever. He's like a magician. Every goddamn time where we think we got rid of him, he finds a way. And now what you're suggesting is that this is one of those scenarios, right? We're going for a fifth election. It seems like Netanyahu is not going to be able to maintain his position in Likud, and yet right at this moment, there are certain events that you're noticing that happen that seems to be that Netanyahu on purpose was trying to get a reaction out of Arab Israelis.
Yeah,
one of
so
them was
go ahead. Yeah, so I'll be very careful here, because it's a bit of a kind of a conspiracy theory. Obviously, I wasn't a fly on the wall in his room. Mm-hmm. But it just so happened that in these few days, exactly when the president gave Netanyahu's opposition the chance to form a coalition, suddenly in these 3 days, mm-hmm. 4 days, you had those events that were causing tension, and as a result of those tensions, especially what happened in Al-Aqsa, the police entering Al-Aqsa. You had Israeli Arabs living in mixed cities. In Israel, you have some cities where Jews and Arabs live alongside each other. Some Israeli Arabs, at least, I don't know whether it's the majority or the minority, we have to be very careful here, started rioting against their Jewish neighbors, vandalizing Jewish property. And as a response, you had some, although to a smaller extent, you have some Jews lynching and rioting against Arabs. Also, this happened. And then Hamas decided that he has something to say, and he said, we are now giving Israel an ultimatum not to change the status quo in Jerusalem, or we will shoot missiles. And indeed, they started shooting missiles. So these are all the events that happened in a very short period now.
Yes, so that's what eventually happened, and that's what everybody's watching on the screens right now as missiles keep being exchanged. But again, I want to emphasize like what we noticed at the beginning. Okay, so putting the barriers there at this time in Ramadan,
They then
was-
removed them, by the way. They put them and then they removed them.
I know, but that was like seemed like that was something that was unnecessary, and it was pretty much like, again, we're not excusing the reaction
Not at all.
of
Not
some
at
of
all.
that. We're not excusing the reaction, but we know that they knew that these are the people that will have these reactions. We also know that they had this of right-leaning, very far right-leaning Jewish people being brought up to to these locations for stirring up more tension. Right? You mentioned.
So what happened in the mixed cities? You have now reports of organized transport of far right activists to those mixed cities.
Right.
To confront the Arab rioters. So that's like pouring oil on the in order to put out the fire. Right?
Right.
Why does the police allow them to get there?
Right. And we had, and the whole in the neighborhood in East Jerusalem, the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. Yes. We know that, yes, these were based on Israeli laws. Again, we have to mention Israeli laws. These belong to some Jewish people.
They would have a case in international law easily. This land was privately owned from the 19th century. Those Jews.
Yes. We don't want to go into the history with Jordan and all. I just want to say that there was ways out of this where the Palestinians could keep those homes and be tenants to the Jews. That those options were offered to the court, but these right-leaning Jewish people on purpose denied that.
The owners of the land denied didn't accept the court's compromise.
Yeah, so there was a way for these Palestinians to stay in those houses and for the Jewish people to maintain ownership over those houses. There was a way out of this, but they didn't go at such a time. They didn't go with that, right? And then we had the police entering the Temple Mount. Like there's a lot of things that just happened in a very short amount of time, independently in different places.
Oh, and one more thing we forgot. We had one of the most extreme right-wing Jews in Israeli politics, a Jewish supremacist called Itamar Ben-Gvir, now a parliament member, regrettably, deciding to open an office in Sheikh Jarrah on Ramadan at this time. So
this guy is connected to Netanyahu, right?
Yes, he's Netanyahu. He's going to be Netanyahu's political partner. He's going to be in his coalition.
Right.
So yes.
So it seems like if you look at it again, guys, just go look at all of these events within we're talking how many days? Like within the span of
I don't remember. Let's say roughly in the last 2 weeks, just for the
beginning. No. I'm not talking about the subsequent reactions to this. I'm talking about the initial initial events that happened independently that managed to get a reaction out of the Arab Israelis.
I think the span was maybe in a week. The span of events was maybe a week, maybe. But I'll have to fact check on the exact number of days.
But we were getting different news reports from different places, all at the same time happening. It does seem like there was an attempt to get a reaction. That's what you're saying.
I'm saying. I'm very careful saying that because I hate conspiracy theorists. Right. I don't want to become one. I'm saying you had a lot of events happening, and certain events definitely could have been handled differently by the Israeli police, and they weren't handled that way by the Israeli police. And the fact that all of that happened, and the fact that it all happened exactly in this under these particular political circumstances, is serving a very specific person in Israeli politics, and that's Netanyahu.
Okay, so let's be less conspiratorial and just look at what's happening. Okay, we can acknowledge for certain that the police, even if, like, let's say that Netanyahu supporters didn't instigate all of this,
yes,
we at least can be sure that given how the police reacted to protesters in front of Netanyahu's house, they had, as you mentioned, the police could have done so much better at responding to how these far-right Jewish mob managed when they were doing
the Arab rioters
and the Arab rioters. Like they could have,
if they stop the Arab riots, if they stop the Arab riots at the beginning effectively, as opposed to let it go on for a day or two, maybe we wouldn't have been.
And
here.
also the far right Jewish mob that showed up,
right? and the far, according to certain reports, there were organized Jewish mobs coming to those mixed cities. But again, I'm very careful with news. What is fake news? What is not fake news? This specific report I read from quite a reliable journalist. Mm-hmm. But again, that it was one journalist that reported it, so I'm careful.
But the presence of far right, the presence of Arabs who were being racist against Arab protesters who were extremely racist against Jews, and also Jewish rioters that were extremely racist against Arabs. The presence of those we know that for a fact, right? But what we're saying is that we have seen how the police has been so effective at managing other protests when they wanted to. So what we especially when we saw what they did in front when the protesters showed up in front of Netanyahu's house. What we're saying is that even if they didn't push for this to happen, they could have easily stopped it from becoming.
I don't know if easily, but
they could
they had the potential. They could have dealt with it more effectively.
Right.
The fact, even the fact that the Arab riots went over to the lengths that they went and got to the point that they've gotten to, is a failure of the police that shouldn't have happened and could have been avoided.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
And we do see that Netanyahu now, after a couple of days of all the now going out to close to maybe even potentially going into Gaza, tanks are. I look at the latest reports. The tanks are on there, ready for the orders to go into Gaza.
Well, if you want, we'll talk about Gaza in a minute. And
we'll
Hamas.
talk about that later. But I'm just saying, I don't. But I'm just saying now that it has escalated to that much, we now see, based on the latest reports, that Netanyahu might come out of all of this as a winner, right?
What happened? Okay, now what happened with the current with the riots and the ethnic tension is that one of the potential partners in the anti-Netanyahu coalition, because it's a right-wing party and because its base is basically religious and right-wing, obviously could not feel that it. I'm speculating why he did that, but obviously could not feel that he can still go on. Joining forces with the center parties and the left-wing parties,
right?
And now said a change government, because they call it a government of change. A government of change is not possible at the moment, and now the reports are that he's now negotiating coalition with Netanyahu again. So this was facilitated, I would say, and not only me, by those ethnic tensions, because this right-wing party could not have afforded not going with a right-wing government right now under these particular circumstances.
Okay, Yuval, I don't want to be conspiratorial here, but is it really a coincidence that every time Netanyahu is about to lose national security, because for some reason something happens, that some conflict rises up and people start uniting behind Netanyahu and he gets saved for some reason?
Well,
are we really being I'm trying not to be conspiratorial?
No, he's not always being saved by external tensions or security problems. Sometimes he's saved because he's a very shrewd political player, and he plays his adversaries and his potential allies in such a way that he brings them to his coalition, and then he betrays them. So he's not. It's different. They're always like last year. It was the beer bug that helped him form a coalition, because guys, it's an emergency. We have the beer bug. So it's every time he finds something. But I can tell you what is not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that Hamas is still alive and kicking in the Gaza Strip, despite the fact that one politician 12 years ago promised to topple it down, and that politician was Netanyahu. So 12 years ago, he was elected based on the promise of toppling down Hamas, and now Hamas is alive and kicking and stronger. And not only that, Hamas is getting $15 million every month from Qatar via Israel, because Israel allows it to happen. Israel can stop it under Netanyahu's government. So that's not a coincidence. This, I can tell you for sure, is not a coincidence, because if Netanyahu wanted, this would have stopped.
Right. So what are you accusing Netanyahu of? Let's just be clear.
I'm accusing Netanyahu of several things. First of all, weakening the police to begin with, because Israeli police didn't have a police chief for 2 years. Netanyahu, because the former police chief appointed by Netanyahu was critical of Netanyahu because of the corruption. So they kicked him out, and they didn't bring a new one. For 2 years, the police in Israel didn't have a chief. And so he was wearing down that. He was allowing crime to grow in the Arab sector. And that was one of the main demands of Arab politicians. They say, we will go into coalition if you promise to deal with the crime families in our sector. So he allowed certain elements in the Arab society to accumulate weapons and to break the law. And the crime scene in Israel today is dominated by Arab crime families, and that's because the police doesn't act effectively against them. This is something I accuse Netanyahu. I accuse so we had the Hamas growing, we had the lack of police, and of course I accuse Netanyahu in embracing the most far-right elements in Israeli politics that formerly could leaders boycotted. He embraces them as potential partners, and by that is embracing plain out racism.
Yeah, and here's an amazing thing. Netanyahu has no ideology. Like, he does not give a crap on who he partners with, as long as it means that he stays in power, right? Guys, if you think like Netanyahu cares about Israeli citizens and security, Netanyahu cares about Netanyahu. Okay, he went as far as, like, back in the time when who was the prime minister that was shot by a Jewish extremist? The prime minister that was shot by a Jewish extremist.
Rabin, yeah.
Rabin, yes. He when that happened, Netanyahu was the person that instigated hatred against him because he was working with the Israeli Arabs. Like, Netanyahu considered that as a betrayal to work with Israeli Arab. But then now recently, just before this, he himself, because of it, he was desperate. He was trying to see if he could work with the Arabs. And
it's not just with the Arabs. There is only one country in the Middle East today where the government is considered cooperation with the Muslim Brotherhood. Not Saudi Arabia,
right?
Not Qatar, not Kuwait, Israel. The only place where the Muslim Brotherhoods were considered as partners in a coalition was Netanyahu's Israel.
Yeah. So
it's not just Arab. It's not just Arabs. There's nothing wrong with being an Arab. These were the These are an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood that Netanyahu considered to have in his coalition, supporting actively or passively from the outside.
But these are the same people that he used to, like, he accused other prime ministers for betraying Israel, for working with them. But then when it comes his turn and he was desperate to form a coalition, he himself now was trying to reach out to them. But
I'm not sure he accused Rabin for this particular thing. I'm not sure he accused Rabin for that particular thing.
He did.
But this is an ongoing accusation. Whenever center left want to go with the Arab parties, they are accused by the right wing for doing so.
I know, but
now Netanyahu goes and embraces them.
Let's go shorter. Let's not go back far back that history. Let's look at now, okay? And let's look closer. Even during his own time in power, he went as far as telling people that, oh my God, the Arabs are voting, that's dangerous, which is extremely racist by Netanyahu, to all of a sudden to switching to oh my God, I'm losing. Hey, Arabs, let's form a coalition, right? And now, as soon as he saw that doesn't work, because a lot of people, a lot of like far right parties started abandoning him.
The most extreme far right party, even they try to accept them and made some talks with them to see if they can get settled with them, but they couldn't. And then they said, we're not going to support a coalition that would get their help in any way. Yes.
Right. So he just swings. He went as far as like, hey, Arabs, don't remember me who said like you guys are voting and Israel will be ruined if you're voting. Can we form a coalition? And as soon as he saw that doesn't work, he swung all the way back to the most racist far right parties in Israel and like, hey, forget those. Let us form a coalition instead. And so he just swings from here to, like, he has no ideology. He just wants to stay in power. And this is why we accuse him of, is it fair to say that he's putting Israelis in danger, like by using Israel's enemies as a weapon against Israeli citizens to scare them enough for him to get votes? Is that a fair accusation of Netanyahu?
I would look. This is a very serious accusation. So I'll be very. I'll be as much as I dislike Netanyahu. I want to be very. It's very tempting for me to get into such accusations, but I want to be very careful with my words. So I would say that I think he puts Israelis in danger by allowing Hamas to stay as strong as it is and stronger. Mm-hmm. And I think it's not a coincidence that he allows Hamas to stay as strong as it is. Okay? So maybe he allows Hamas to stay because he thinks it's of Israel's interest, but I doubt it. You have to be very unintelligent, and Netanyahu is not unintelligent. You have to be very unintelligent to think that Hamas existence benefits Israel. And yet Netanyahu allows Hamas to stay for 12 years, right? And by doing so, look, if you live in southern Israel, you have people in southern Israel today. How old are you, Armin?
37.
Okay, no. So you have people in Israel, in southern Israel, that in the last let's say 20 years, or let's say in the last 16 years, are accustomed. So if you're a 16-year-old Israeli, let's say in southern Israel, you grew up into running to the shelter because of missiles. That's the routine of your life since the day that you were born. Yes, and this is thanks, and the reason it goes on is thanks to Netanyahu, because he could have toppled Hamas if he wanted to, but he didn't want to. And he allows them to get a monthly allowance of $15 million until this very day. And by doing so, he's endangering Israelis, and I would say that it serves his purposes. Yes.
Okay, so you just said what I said then. You got
me there. You got me there. Yeah, you got me angry enough. You got me angry enough to get there eventually. Yes.
Let's just repeat again what we're saying, basically, because I know it sounds really. I know, like, it just sounds such a big accusation that it's hard to repeat it, but I want to say it again. Okay, we're accusing Netanyahu of playing with Israelis' lives, putting them in danger of rocket attacks by Hamas, only so that he could remain in power. That's what we're accusing Netanyahu of.
I wouldn't say only that he can remain in power. I'm accusing him of allowing Hamas to stay in power, even though it endangers Israeli lives.
But for what?
For what reason? For what reason? Yeah. Why does he do it? Why does he do it? You should ask him. But definitely, it serves him to a degree. It serves him to a degree.
You just don't want to say it. It just sounds so bad.
Look, it's such a horrible accusation, man. I have to say, with all my dislike of the man, I can still not fathom a mind that can think in such a way. You understand? It's just very hard for me to fathom how someone can get to such degrees of cynicism, and that is why I'm so careful here.
Maybe the potential.
Maybe there is 1% that I'm wrong here, and he thought it would be good for another reason. Maybe.
Well, okay, maybe maybe it's not just staying in power. Maybe him losing power is more big of a deal for him than other people, because he could potentially go to jail for corruption once he loses his power, right?
This is also no. That's definitely something that scares him. And I would also tell our viewers that the most serious corruption charge is not yet put against him, because the state attorney is somehow shielding him from that one. But this means one of the main accusations against Netanyahu is that he, in opposition to the army's opinion, purchased submarines in billions of dollars from a German company where his cousin serves as a lobbyist. So even though the army says that they don't want these submarines, Netanyahu decided to purchase submarines in billions of dollars from Israel's taxpayers' money in certain from companies that were in business ties with two of his cousins, right? And this money could have gone, for example, for better APCs, better armored vehicles for the soldiers to protect them better, and other things. Now, one of the demands of the opposition is that once we get to power, we're going to open and investigate. We're going to start to establish an investigation committee to investigate this particular affair. Now, if this affair blows up, Netanyahu might be even accused in things that are far worse than corruption.
All right. So here's the thing. Everything about this is tragic, but one thing that really hurts me the most is demonstrating how deep-rooted the hatred is, right? Because for so long, we have been given the impression that it's, just look at the Arabs and Jews in Tel Aviv living side by side, and when there is no conflict, they seem to be getting along. When I was in Tel Aviv, I saw this Arab sweet store that sell the best sweets ever, and I know I am against sugar, but it was so glorious to watch. And you had so many people in line. You had Jews, you had Arabs, and the line went like 2 streets, and when I went to Jerusalem, when it was Sabbath, and the Jews in Jerusalem couldn't eat food, all of them would drive to the closest Arab city because they wouldn't close down. And you could see in this Arab city, all these Jews would come to this Arab city next to Jerusalem so that it was possible for them to eat food in the restaurant on their evening. And you get the impression that these people are capable of living next to each other. There is enough land in between the Jordan River and Mediterranean Sea. There's enough land for both of these people, okay? If they stop telling each other horrible stories about each other, there is enough land for everyone there. And you just get the impression that these people are being used by other people for their own agenda. But the thing is but now when events like this happen, when we see that it's not just between the Israeli government and Hamas, we're watching in the streets where Jewish radicals are attacking and violently attacking Arabs, and Arab radicals civilians are violently attacking Jews. You feel like this hatred has actually sunk deep into the people, and this is not something that you're going to be able to cleanse out. Like, this is not something that you will be able to fix at all for many years with just a political fix. So you get all those years of demonstrating how Arab Israelis can live with Jewish Israelis with these images. These images are going to be imprinted in people's minds for decades to come, and it's just going to throw away so much goodwill. What are your thoughts?
Look, first of all, regrettably, we have evidence from recent history of neighbors that lived alongside each other for years, and then in an instant became enemies. So you had that in the Balkans, you had that obviously in Rwanda, where you have two groups. They even speak the same language. They live one next to each other, and we saw what happened. So these tensions are there. The degree of hostility is there, but I think the situation, whilst cannot be maybe 100% resolved, at least not in our generation, it can be managed differently. One can create circumstances that would allow the situation to be managed differently, and this I think should be the goal. I told you before, I grew up in a mixed area. I grew up in an area where the Jewish villages and Arab villages were intertwined. And generally speaking, we had good relations, but we knew there were days where we knew we would go to the neighboring Arab village because there was some tension. So we just knew in particular days, especially there's one day in the year, every year they call it the day of the land day. This day you don't go to the village. So the tension is always there, but this tension can be managed.
Right. So let's look at actually managing this tension, and how Netanyahu is responsible in much bigger ways when we look at the big picture. Because right now we just talked about the events that were just happening in the past few days, right?
Yeah. Sorry. If I can just ask. Yeah, you decided to focus this particular video just on Netanyahu. I'm just curious. I'm not critical. I just.
I started that way, but we could go in different directions.
Yeah. Okay. No, I follow your lead. I'm just curious to.
No. I mean, we could. It just helps to have an anchor, right? Mm-hmm. And then use that anchor to discuss everything.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Right. So, but we could go anywhere with this, right? So you tell me if you want to go into a different direction. You don't have to just follow my lead.
Yeah. No. So I will just comment then, because we've mentioned Hamas, we mentioned Hamas and we mentioned the Muslim Brotherhood in Israel. I would say this.
Let's just be clear to people. Hamas is technically Muslim Brotherhood, Palestinian Muslim Brotherhood, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
okay, go ahead.
there is an undeclared, unwritten, passive partnership, I would say, even if it's not acknowledged, between certain elements in the Israeli right wing and the organizations like Hamas. And the fact that Netanyahu's government allowed Hamas to take over Gaza and to flourish, or to remain in Gaza, is not an accident. I think they would prefer Hamas there rather than the Palestinian Authority, because once you have Gaza and the West Bank under the same government, this opens the door for a Palestinian state. Now when you got them divided, it's easier not to talk about a Palestinian state, because then who you're talking to? We don't talk to Hamas, and then if we talk to the Palestinian Authority, then it's only the West Bank. So where's the Palestinian state here? So it's convenient for them to keep Hamas in power, whilst they loathe Hamas and consider it an arch enemy. They are at the same time convenient with him, comfortable with Hamas ruling Gaza rather than the Palestinian Authority. Secondly, and now, by the way, this didn't start now. They were in the late 80s. Hamas, the main players in the 80s in the Gaza Strip, when Israel was still fully occupying the Gaza Strip, those were Marxist groups, secular or relatively nationalist secular groups. And then Israel turned a blind eye from this Muslim organization, open charities, and doing da'wah. That's like propaganda for the faith. And they turned a blind eye, and that wasn't a coincidence. Actually, they let it grow, and now we're paying now the region is paying the price for that. Now sorry, go on.
Actually, it's not just that they turned a blind eye. It can be argued that they actively supported them against the PLO.
I don't have evidence for them actively supporting them against the PLO, but if you do, you will. Yeah, please bring them on.
Yeah, we have 3 here. According to Robert, so this is Robert Drake. I have 3 it's hard to pronounce these people's names, right? But these are ambassadors and intelligence officers, and they're saying that that Muslim Brotherhood. So there's 3 different accounts of intelligence officers that I can send you later. But what they're saying is that not Hamas itself, but the proto-Hamas, the earlier Islamic groups that eventually became Hamas, was supported by Israelis, not necessarily because they thought it will lead to where they are right now, but they were seen as a better group,
a counterweight
to PLO. Right,
PLO, yes.
as a way to create some division within the Palestinians, and as a way to not the PLO, which was. I know I'm not defending the PLO, but let's be honest. Let's be honest. No, I'm not. But let's be honest. They were more secular, less radical than Hamas, and what that ended up being. Right. Again, I'm not defending them when I say that, but it's relatively much more. And they were much more left-wing. So basically what we have is that the Israeli intelligence basically trying to use a far-right Islamic group as a way to fight a leftist as nationalist group, and to create conflict. And actually the conflict between now what it is Fatah and Hamas, which is the evolution of that conflict, has been very much in favor of, Netanyahu's administration, right?
Look, I think I first of all, I'm not sure I'm as confident as you in saying that Israel intelligence was definitely involved in actively supporting Hamas or the what Hamas was, the predecessor of Hamas. But definitely, as a tactic of divide and rule, I can see how this can be beneficial, generally speaking.
All right. Let me read this for you. New York Times reporter David Shipler cites the Israeli military governor of Gaza as boasting that Israeli expressly financed the fundamentalists against the PLO. So this is his quote: "Politically speaking, Islamic fundamentalists were sometimes regarded as useful to Israel because they had conflicts with the secular supporters of the PLO. Violence between the two groups erupted occasionally on the West Bank, university campuses. Israeli military governor of the Gaza Strip, Brigadier General Yitzhak Segev, once told me how he had financed the Islamic movement as a counterweight to the PLO and the communists. The Israeli government gave me a budget, and the military government gives to the mosques," he said. So I have
so it doesn't surprise me, especially regrettably the short-sightedness doesn't surprise me here. Mm-hmm. So the idea that we need to do everything so that we won't have to deal with the leadership, Palestinian leadership, because God forbid if we deal with them, we'll have to come to some kind of a compromise, right? So it's better for us to keep the Palestinians divided and not willing to negotiate, because then we are in a comfortable seat of, look, they don't want to talk to us. What do you want from us, right? So it's convenient. It's convenient for Israel, and I think Sharon also was very happy to see Hamas take over Gaza. It's convenient for Israel to sit and say, well, guys, even the Palestinians cannot make up their minds who want to lead them, and they elect Hamas, who is against us. So. And right now we are paying the price of Netanyahu allowing this to go on, even though he promised not to. He promised exactly. He got elected in 2009 based on a promise to topple Hamas, and then he's doing the opposite because I think the situation, he finds it beneficial in one way or another.
Let me make something else clear, okay? And I think you're not going to willing to come here with me, okay? So
let's see.
I'm going to take a position, I'm going to take a position that is going to be too bold for you to take. Okay.
Let's see.
I'm saying that people like Netanyahu, okay, want the Palestinians to pick Hamas as their leaders. Oh, you agree?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah, of course, because the minute. Look, the minute Hamas, let's say Hamas is elected both in Gaza Strip and the West Bank, right? And just so our viewers will know, in the last elections, Hamas won. The prime minister, officially the prime minister of the Palestinian Authority, is Ismail Haniyeh. He was the one elected in 2006, I believe it was, or 2005. Now, of course, it's very easy. It would make Netanyahu's job very easy to have Hamas as the leader of the Palestinians. Now, I would say this: it's not that the Fatah is practically more moderate. No, but the Fatah
we're
is
not
the far
defending Fatah.
No, because the Fatah is simply a better player in the geopolitics. So the Fatah can appear to be moderate and get interim concessions and more interim concessions and more interim concessions, and then at the end, when they show the Fatah the map of the two-state solution, say, okay, this is the map, they will find an excuse why they won't sign it and why the negotiations should be blown up. That's what Fatah's going to do. So, of course, for Netanyahu, it's easier to have Hamas, because Hamas outright says we want to destroy Israel.
So, again, you realize what you're saying, Yuval. You are saying that an anti-Semitic genocidal group, which is Hamas, right? You're saying the people who are in charge of Israel right now are using a group of people that would, I'm trying to use words that YouTube doesn't get censor us by, right? That Israeli citizens, Israeli people, Jewish people in Israel will not survive if Hamas had its way. So I'm just saying it in a way that YouTube doesn't survive, right? Such a group, right? That is such an anti-Semitic pro-genocide group is the group of people that Netanyahu wants to see in power. Is that not a betrayal? Like, is that not the worst leader Israeli citizens could have?
No. I'll explain the rationale behind. There is a rationale behind it. I think Netanyahu benefits from Hamas in the fact that Hamas periodically bombs Israeli cities and then people vote for him. In that sense, he benefits. But the idea of having Hamas as a leader of Palestinians, I can see the logic in it, because Hamas, the way I see it, Hamas is simply a more honest version of Fatah. Hamas is honest Fatah. Hamas is Fatah that says outright what he thinks, as opposed to Fatah that says one thing but actually has another goal. So I will, of course.
Say that again. Say that again.
I'm saying when it comes to
be careful with the mic before you're hitting the mic.
Okay, when it comes to the approach towards Israel and Israel's right to exist, Hamas is simply a more honest version of Fatah. Fatah and Hamas, at the end of the day, both Fatah and Hamas cannot get to themselves to the point to recognize Israel's right to exist. But Fatah is more shrewd. And this is why Fatah doesn't say it outright when they speak to the West. So it is easier for Israel to have Hamas in leadership, because Hamas is not as sophisticated, and they say it outright.
Yuval, I don't support Fatah, okay? I do not support Fatah. But they are not as genocidal as, they don't recognize Israel, right? But they are not, Hamas is a different animal. Like, again, I'm not saying that as a defense of Fatah, right?
You just call them animals. No, I'm joking. Yeah.
No, okay. Hamas, that's an insult to animals, to be fair. But I'm talking about Hamas, right?
You say Fatah is not as genocidal as Hamas. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, of course.
I would say, first of all, I can give you. I should have prepared it before, but I can give you a ceremony of the Imam of the PA. A speech that he gave.
Yes, of course. I can find
No. In the Fatah anniversary, they invited him to speak in the Fatah anniversary. And guess which hadith did he choose to bring up in the Fatah anniversary? Of course, the hadith about the stones and the trees.
Yes, I know. I'm not saying they're not anti-Semitic, okay? Yes. I'm not saying they're not. I'm just saying Hamas is worse. Is it really that controversial to say Hamas is worse?
Hamas is worse. Hamas is worse in the sense that even with Hamas you cannot even reach an interim compromise.
Okay. Anyways,
with the Fatah you can. With the Hamas you can't. And the way I view it in real politics, interim compromises sometimes can get solidified. So that's why I would prefer Fatah, because with Fatah we might get to an interim solution that would hold.
Yeah, but okay. So whatever the difference between Fatah and Hamas is, what we know is that the division between having two of them rather than one of them serves politicians, right-leaning politicians in Israel that want to remain in power, right? Like having this Hamas and Gaza and having Fatah in West Bank. That's definitely just working wonders for them, right? That this is perfect. Yes. It's a perfect situation for them, right? And so here's another point that I want to say is that we gave so many examples of how the right-leaning politicians in Israel are making everything worse for Israelis and for Palestinians. But bigger picture, the way that they are not helping anybody is the settlements in West Bank, right? And this could be, I know that what the standard response to that is going to be, because what we're saying is that it makes absolutely no sense for the sake of for the security of Israelis or for the lives of Palestinians. The settlements in the West Bank makes absolutely no sense. There's no good reason for settlements in the West Bank. You agree with that, correct?
I don't think there is any good reason. Of course, if a Jew wants to privately buy a house in the West Bank, they have a right to do so.
Of course.
But here's the problem with the settlements, and that's the biggest problem. When Israel builds settlements in the West Bank, and they are like municipal authorities, right? Israeli municipal authorities. They have mayors or whatever, or leaders of the council, whatever. What Israel is doing is playing a double game. It says, look, we are not annexing the West Bank.
Oh my God.
The West Bank is not part of Israel, but we're going to build towns there. So it's kind of a double game that Israel is playing, and there is just that limit of time that you can play. Either you annex the West Bank, which means you have to give citizenship to everyone there, or don't build settlements there. You can't play it both ways.
I really want to get. I don't want to get too worked up too much in the details because I'm trying to make a bigger point, right?
Yes.
Overall, you agree that settlements in the West Bank are a horrible idea, right?
I think so, I think they're the best in most cases. With few exceptions, they are a bad idea. I think they're damaging the interest of Israel, and I think they're endangering the Zionist project. As a Zionist, I don't want them.
That's what I'm trying to get to, but let me work to get to that. But be careful, you're hitting the microphone, right? So, So what we're saying, okay, and we say that as Zionists, me and you are both Zionists. We support Israel's right to defend itself and right to exist, and we think the creation of Israel was a good idea for the Jews at that time. We want Israel to prosper, and
Absolutely.
we think, me and you think that the settlements in the West Bank goes against the security and prosperity of Israel, let alone what it does for peace and prosperity for the Palestinians. It's a horrible idea. But it's not a dumb decision because it makes absolute sense for people who benefit from conflict. So the people who are benefiting from the settlements in the West Bank are Hamas, Hezbollah, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and right-leaning politicians in Israel. Is that fair to say?
It's fair to say. The only exception is I don't think it's the settlements that prevent peace. I think peace wouldn't come even if they weren't there. But other than that, I agree with you. I think the settlements are endangering any sane solution or even temporary solution to the problem. Mm-hmm. And I think they're going to entrap two hostile ethnic groups in one political unit, and this never ends well. History tells us you take two hostile ethnic groups in the same state or in the same country, eventually there's going to be a disaster. And the settlements force us to be there.
Right.
And this is
So
why the settlements endanger the Zionist project. They're a danger first and foremost to the Zionist project and the state of Israel. That's the way, and Israeli democracy. That's the
right.
way I view it.
Yeah, I mean, Israel democracy is going
That's
to.
the way I view it. Yes, other Israelis would say that I
No,
don't understand.
that's
don't read
also
the
the
map.
way
Yes.
that's the way I view it. I think. Hold on, let me close this. I think
Yeah.
Netanyahu has managed to destroy any chances for a future for Israel as a democratic state for Jewish people.
I'm not
Because
sure. I'm not sure.
close to can you make it, because of the chances of a two-state solution has gone almost close to zero now with all the settlements, right? I don't see any way out of this.
No, not necessarily. And I'll explain why. Most of the settlements are concentrated in certain bulks, and Israel doesn't even have to negotiate two-state solution. Israel can make a decision to unilaterally withdraw from the West Bank, whilst
But that's not
remaining.
going to happen.
Whilst remaining in the bulks of those particular settlements. So 90% of the West Bank will be without any Israeli forces. Israel can do it unilaterally. It's strong enough to do it.
Yuval,
So
the
the
places
settlement,
that
the settlements cannot prevent that, because if the army says, let's say the remote settlements would say we are not evacuating, the army say, okay guys, we leave you here and we go. What do you think they're going to do? Of course they're going to go as well. So but the problem is that because there's so many people there, then of course Israelis would say, no, how can we abandon them? That's the main problem with the settlements. I think Israel can still make unilateral withdrawals and force those settlers in the areas that we are withdrawing from to withdraw with it. I think Israel can still do it.
But that's not going to happen. You know that's not going to happen.
Under this government, of course not.
Okay.
Under this government, no. But I don't think
no.
But you said it's going to be impossible. I said no. I think if there'll be a different government,
close to impossible.
No.
I think any one of the yes, under an imaginary different government that is so like, which of the competing parties to the Likud has ever suggested, like, other than the lefties, which don't have any chance anymore, like, they're all for the settlements. Like, anybody that has a chance is for the settlements. And another thing is, as time goes by, the settlements are getting deeper and deeper in, and it's not just about where the settlements are, it's about the way to get to the settlements and how that cuts the whole Palestinians' lands into pieces where they can't even like freely move within. Like, it's becoming, they are so strategically being picked in places where they're designed to make undoing this process as difficult as possible for anybody that ever thinks about even undoing it. Right?
Yeah, but I think, as I said, I think Israel can still, even by unilateral steps, can undo it, because the settlements are dependent on the protection of the army, so they won't stay there if the army goes.
Yes, they could.
Or better yet, they might stay there and maybe try and establish some positive relations with their neighbors.
It could happen, Yuval. It could happen. The Jewish Messiah might also come and
no. I'll give you a name. I'll give you a name of a politician. No. I'll give you a name of a politician that spoke about a two-state solution. You know his name. His name is Netanyahu. Yes, Netanyahu once gave a speech in Bar-Ilan University. Okay, so what I'm saying is, never say never, especially not in the middle. That was a lie, though.
All right. Okay. But
he always whatever he says is a lie. So what
okay, yes, exactly. But here's the thing: can you agree with me at least that the chances are lower than before? Two-state solution.
Yes,
much lower.
Agree with
okay.
Yes,
that does. All right. So here's the thing: what people get confused is that I say that I agree with you that what needs to happen, if anybody cared about Israeli people and Palestinian people, would be to get out of the West Bank yesterday, like immediately. That would be the best thing, right?
Most of it, yeah, the very most of it, yes.
So the reaction is, but Armin, you're so wrong. We have history and we've seen what happens when Israel pulled out of Gaza. That didn't help at all. And
No,
in fact,
it did help. It did, okay.
okay,
I can respond to that.
I have my response to that. What's your response to that?
Okay, so the reaction of people say, look, if Israel withdraws from the West Bank, there are going to be missiles on Tel Aviv, there are going to be attacks from the West Bank. My response is that might very well be true. But it is better than a situation where those two ethnic groups are forced to live together, because the outcome of that would be far worse. It is easier to manage a conflict between two groups that are territorially separated with a border between them than to manage a conflict between two groups that are intertwined. Once you have the two entities separated with a border, it becomes a border conflict between two armies. That's what it becomes eventually. Even now with Gaza, basically it's an armed conflict between two armed forces, Hamas and the IDF. That's what it is. Imagine what would have happened if Gaza was littered with settlements, Jewish settlements within it, right? It would be far worse. So it is easier to manage a conflict when you have a border between the two fighting parties. And this is why it is essential to leave the West Bank. You're going to stay in the West Bank. You're going to stay in the West Bank. There's going to be a demographic competition between Jews and Arabs until maybe one day Israel will not be a Jewish state, simply because the majority won't be Jewish.
Right. So no, we'll get to that soon. But my point, what I would say is that the point of pulling out of the West Bank is beyond just strategic militarily, like, oh, but now they're gonna. The point is that if you like pull out of Gaza and don't pull out of the West Bank, pulling out of Gaza would mean very little, because if you're still in the West Bank, you're not going to have the two-state solution. So pulling only out of Gaza and not out of the West Bank, it's as if like you did it, like, to me, that it's not like going to achieve this two-state solution because you're still in the West Bank. Like, I'm saying it as a pulling out of the West Bank as a road to something bigger than, oh, does it make militarily strategic sense? Do you know what I mean? Like, you will never, this whole tension will keep escalating and escalating and escalating more and more, and become, as you were saying, more unresolvable decade by decade, the longer you don't have the two-state solution. And you're not going to get a two-state solution if you only pull out of Gaza but stay in the West Bank, right? So that's why you also need to pull out of the West Bank. But I don't think that's going to happen anymore. And unfortunately, I think, like, people Netanyahu have made it possible for Israel to because what's going to, here's the thing, there's three options, right? There's three options: two-state solution, status quo, one-state solution. Status quo is not going to stay forever. Two-state solution has become extremely unlikely. So at some point, we're going to have a one-state solution. That's the more likely scenario. And that one-state solution could come about in the most ugliest way possible, or less ugly than I'm imagining. And I'm not even going to describe what I'm talking about, because people might be thinking that I'm advocating for it.
Okay. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
None of the three solutions is going to result in peace. I can tell you already.
Yeah.
The question is, which model of conflict will be the easiest to manage and maybe to settle down.
Right.
And the scenario of Israel withdrawing from most of the West Bank and creating a border, I wouldn't even call it a two-state solution, because I don't know what's going to happen once Israel withdraws. Maybe it will be anarchy there. I have no idea. Maybe Daesh will take over. But the idea of having a border between Israel and its enemies is what's going to help manage the conflict. The quietest border Israel had was with its arch enemy Syria before Syria fell apart. And it was the quietest border. Why? Because it was a solid border and none of the sides had an interest to cross it to the other side. So solid borders are a very good way to stabilize the situation. And this is why, and it doesn't mean it's going to bring peace, but it's going to help settle down the situation. And this is why I prefer an Israeli withdrawal from most of the West Bank and having a solid border, just like with Gaza.
So two things we need to touch on very fast, because we've been already one over an hour. I don't know how much we want to talk about this, but something that people are not talking. I don't even know if we want to talk about it, but I just want to bring attention to the Islamic Republic of Iran's role on all of this, which I think might get highlighted even more in the upcoming weeks. We could come back to this later once it does get highlighted. But let's go actually to something that people are talking about. The missiles that are being dropped on Gaza, the way that people are criticizing Israel for it is not. I still want to criticize Israel for it, but not in the way that other people are, right? Because it's really difficult. Like, once you actually learn the details of what you're supposed to do, like if you have missiles coming out of Gaza onto your civilians, any other nation will have responded. And yes, the way that they're responding, civilians are dying and children are dying. And we then say, well, Hamas is using civilians as human shields, okay? But then the response to that is, well, Gaza is so freaking tight that even if they weren't, we know that Hamas actively does use humans as civilians as shield. But honestly, even if they weren't, it will practically happen anyways, because how Gaza, Gans.
No, because Hamas can place its arms. Look, Gaza. If you never had the pleasure of visiting the Gaza Strip, I can tell you, Gaza has the cities, but in between it has agricultural areas, and if not vast, but still. And if Hamas wanted, he could have all its military infrastructure outside the cities. But Hamas doesn't want to do that because Hamas. You know why.
We know we have active reports. We know for a fact that it is Hamas's strategy to use civilians.
Suha is asking a question, and I want to, because Suha is Palestinian, I really do want to address her question. Hi Yuval, do you think the border with Jordan is strong? I think the border between Israel and Jordan is very, very well managed and strong, because both governments have an interest of it being strong. That's my opinion.
All right, but can we finish it? The questions will be there. I do want to, because these segments will be cut into different videos, so I do want to finish a thought before we go to a question. But I will find a question if you need to. Okay. Yes, we do know that Hamas does use this as a strategy. Okay. And again, most other countries. Again, I have to be very careful because children are dying. I don't actually know what's the best way to address this, okay? Because the argument is that if there are missiles coming from any other countries, if they had a neighbor and there were missiles coming down on their civilians, they will have a similar or maybe even bigger response than what Israel is doing.
Far more violent, far bigger response.
Yes.
Far more violent response.
So what the criticism that we have for Israel right now is not, let me say, actually, is actually putting itself in a position that it has to shoot missiles into Gaza. Yes, if you were forced, again, I have to be very careful because people are going to take my words out of context and I don't know how this is going to be interpreted, right? I would say that the missiles going to Gaza could have been justified if people like Netanyahu were not responsible for getting us to this position. Do you understand what I'm saying?
So again, say it again, sorry.
So the missiles that are being shot into Gaza would have been more easily defended, in my opinion, if Netanyahu's administration was not responsible to force its hand by itself into the situation. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to take accountability away, because this is going to make it seem like I'm taking accountability away from Hamas, right? And I'm not. Okay, Hamas. I just like, let's just be clear with that. Hamas is a disgusting, vile, radical organization that is, nobody should excuse them. Nothing they do is justified. Okay, but as we discussed here, this regime, this administration by Netanyahu, they have played with anything that they could play with to make Hamas a threat on the Israelis, for them to have to respond to make their existence justify their own existence, to justify their relevancy and their power. Okay, so again, yes, if you only look at the current picture, look at what happening in the you see Hamas is shooting at civilians, and again, when Hamas shoots at in Israel, they don't care if they hit civilians. Okay, and just because Israel has a much higher military might, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be defending themselves. It makes no sense. People are like, oh yeah, but Israel has more power, so what? So they shouldn't use that power to defend themselves? No, they absolutely should. Hamas is shooting missiles on civilians, and Israel, when they're shooting at Hamas, they're not trying to kill civilians, but they know that that's going to be part of the cost of shooting at Hamas targets. They know that, but they're not going to let that go without a response. So if you're looking only, if your view is only, oh, Hamas is shooting, so Israel has to respond, then you could see like, okay, this reaction is Israel defending itself. But once you zoom out a little bit and see how we got here, then you could criticize Netanyahu's administration for children dying in Gaza. Do you know what I mean?
I'm not sure I agree. The only thing I agree is that Netanyahu allowed Hamas to grow too much. But that's one thing I can accuse Netanyahu of. But I think Israel would have been criticized, or would have been put in a situation where it would have to shoot missiles or respond in Gaza the way it does, regardless. If Palestinians would have,
it would be less. Israel, it would be less.
It depends.
It's not a binary thing. It's not like, oh, it will happen, not happen. We know that things have been escalated, or at least not well managed, both short term. As we just discussed here, both short term and long term policies has not been in the interest of reducing the conflict. We already demonstrated that. So again,
Netanyahu is responsible for allowing Hamas to grow as strong as it grew. That's for sure. I totally agree with you on that. But then to draw a line to each and every consequence of the conflict, that's a bit of a stretch. So now he's responsible for children dying in Gaza. No, first and foremost people responsible for that is Hamas, because they put their forces there.
Again, I'm not excusing that. Of course, we're not excusing that. First and foremost are the people who are okay. Here's the thing. We already have this is why I have to, every time I have to clarify that we have already established that Hamas is a genocidal group that is violent and nobody should excuse them. And I'm hoping by saying that we have this understanding that we are condemning them, and now we could talk about the role of like
but okay, I'll put it differently. Let's say tomorrow there'll be another prime minister in Israel, not Netanyahu, another leader, a far more moderate one. Hamas would still try and attack Israel, and if they would use the same tactics. So this other moderate leader would end up also killing, having collateral damage in Gaza.
Again, it's not a binary thing, Yuval. You could rise tension, you could reduce tension. Reducing tension doesn't mean you wouldn't have no tensions. It will just, having less tensions means less children dying. Okay, it's not like zero. It's not like 0 or 100. right?
Yeah,
If
so
you
now,
cause more tensions, you are responsible for more Palestinian civilians dying and for more Israeli civilians dying.
so now I would play Netanyahu's advocate, and I would tell you, look, let's say if I come from Netanyahu's position, said, look, I actually try to calm the situation because I allowed Qatar to deliver $15 million every month, so maybe they can use the money, they'll have a bit better economy, maybe they'll have a reason not to attack Israel, they have something to lose. I try to calm down the situation. I actually try to get to some kind of understanding via the Egyptians, because the Egyptians were the mediators with Hamas. So yeah, I also try to calm down the situation. That's something that they can say in their defense. I think it's a weak defense because I think a person should be smart enough to understand it wouldn't work. But to be honest, but that's something that you hear from people that try to defend Israeli policies in that respect.
So actually, let's look at this. Okay, we know that shooting missiles into Gaza is not going to stop Hamas. If anything, it's going to fuel their funding. We know that. Okay? So
I'm not sure. Look, if you want to go talk about tactical solutions, I think the best tactical solutions would be to hunt down personally
right.
the leadership, the military leadership of Hamas, and Israel has ways of doing it, and I think it's doing it when it can.
No, okay. Actually, that's a very good point. Israel went into hostile territory, into Iran, and they had spies living with Fakhrizadeh, Iran's top nuclear scientist, okay? And they took this man out with such a precision that with all of his bodyguards around him, with his wife being centimeters away from him, and nobody died but Fakhrizadeh, okay? That's what Mossad is capable of.
I think they had they had something to do with Qasem Soleimani also, which I think was even better protected.
No, Qasem Soleimani was Americans. Okay, Fakhrizadeh was
okay.
Okay. No, with the
Who
help
knows? We don't know. Okay, we don't know. Okay.
No, we know. But Fakhrizadeh was taken down by Mossad, and it was beautiful. It was such like
it made you sing.
My congratulations to Mossad for such a beautiful takedown.
Your heart was singing when it heard.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
No, but it was this collateral damage was not even a bruise on his wife that was right next to him. That's how Israel can do. So what I'm saying is that if Israel wanted to take out Hamas, they would be able to find their leaders, send people there, and I know they have the capabilities of taking these people out, the leaders, okay? They are in a position to completely
but okay, here's the thing. I would assume I never assassinate anyone, let alone on a foreign soil, but I would assume that to take down Fakhrizadeh was years of preparation. Now, the situation in Gaza doesn't always allow Israel to take years of preparation. It's not the same. Also, Fakhrizadeh was a nuclear physicist. When you take down Fakhrizadeh, it would take Iranians a few good years of training to replace him with another just as capable nuclear physicist. Hamas operatives, to become a Hamas operative, you don't need to go through all the training of Fakhrizadeh. So it's not always the exact same best solution to what works in Iran for a nuclear physicist was an operation that took years, and now it would take years to replace this guy. That doesn't necessarily apply for Gaza. I can tell you for a fact there is one person in Gaza. His name is Muhammad Def. You want to do your insurance company, your life insurance with his company, because this guy, Israel tried to kill him 4 times. I think he doesn't have any limbs anymore, if my memory serves me right. And every time he still survived. So it doesn't always work. But If you ask me what Israel should do, yes, it should go personally and hunt down the most capable operatives, and just make sure that they cannot spend the night in 2 nights in the same bed, so to make it harder for them to operate. That's what I think they should do tactically. But I'm not a tactical expert. More than that's the way I think Israel should go. It should go like there was an Israeli chief of staff that said, Eisenkot said, rather than use the F-16, we should use the M16. M16 is an assault rifle. So instead of using the so that's
okay. Who was this? Who's this guy? Who said this?
Gadi Eisenkot. He was an Israeli chief of staff.
Is he a tactician? Like, is he a military guy?
He was the Israeli chief of staff. He was the commander-in-chief of the Israeli army.
Okay, so we heard it from an expert, from an Israeli expert. Okay, so here, what I'm advocating was you just heard somebody, which is an Israeli military head, like chief, whatever. I don't know how to rank it.
Yeah.
You just got the full endorsement of what I am suggesting.
It's just that the thing in Gaza, sometimes the response in Gaza should be fast, and those operations you can't don't happen fast. Those operations take time to prepare. But sometimes in Gaza you have to respond fast. Like if they shoot a missile tomorrow, you cannot wait now for 5 years to get the operation done to kill.
Yeah, but you don't have to wait for stuff like this to happen to annihilate Hamas. You could just go and annihilate Hamas before. But the thing is that they don't want to. My point is that they don't want to annihilate Hamas.
No. It's more than that. That's also a point. But it's more than that, because, for example, let's say now there is a year of calmness. No missiles. But as you say, Israel should prepare. So Israel should try and assassinate them before something happens.
Right.
But the mere assassination can now trigger a cycle of missiles and response to the missiles. So it's not that easy. It's not like with Iran. Iran won't start a war over Fakhrizadeh. Iran won't start shooting missiles over Fakhrizadeh. But Hamas will shoot missiles over one of its operatives being assassinated.
If you completely annihilate Hamas. No,
okay. So if you want to annihilate Hamas, that's an overall you have the assassinations, but it won't end with the assassinations. You have to do far more military-wise.
I am in favor
military-wise.
I'm in favor of that, but in favor of not killing, in favor of saving Palestinian civilians, even the ones with the horrible views. They're civilians, and I want to protect them. And if that takes a military on the ground taking out of all Hamas leaders, if that means saving Palestinian civilians, I'm in favor of that.
But the military operation on the ground will eventually cost also civilian lives. There will be collateral damage.
But it will be
there will be collateral damage.
Yes, there will always be collateral damage. But I'm just saying this would be a one and for all ending operation. Nobody will support this.
In the Middle East, there is never once. We call it in Hebrew "zbang and finish." That's the Hebrew term for it, like a once and for all. And we know there are no once and for all solutions in the Middle East. You'll cut this snake's head.
What I'm saying, nobody's in, like, everybody that has a say is in favor of the conflict continuing. Okay, like the people that actually are in charge of the decisions, like the influence of the Islamic Republic of Iran, even Fatah, Hezbollah, Hamas, far right-leaning politicians in Israel, fundamentalist Christians from the United States, they all benefit from more conflict. They all want more conflict.
Not only them. Also certain elements in the Palestinian society benefit because those who didn't give up the dream of the entire state of Palestine would rather, and this is why I say Fatah would never sign a final peace agreement. They would rather have the conflict going on and on and on until they're the majority, and then they come to the world and say, look, we're the majority, just give us the right to vote, and that's it. We are the majority, one man, one vote.
Exactly, and that will be the end of Israel.
So this is why they want the conflict to go on and on
Yes.
and on until the circumstances is good for them to come and become the majority.
And that would be the end of Israel, and that's
Absolutely.
something, and that's something that Netanyahu is gifting to them.
Regrettably, yes.
So Netanyahu is good if things go the way they are. Netanyahu, who is supposed to be
the whole right wing, not just Netanyahu.
The whole right wing, but we're using Netanyahu. Yeah, we're basically Netanyahu representing the right-leaning politicians. Yes. What I'm saying is that the person, the champion of Israel, the person that is voted in over and over again by Israelis as the defender and the guardian of Israelis and Israel as a country, is the person that is most going to be responsible mostly for its demise.
Regrettably, but unfortunately, most Israelis don't see it the way you and I see it, because most Israelis don't realize that keeping the West Bank is like keeping a leg with a cancer tumor instead of amputating it. So it's like a person that has a tumor on his leg, and we say you should cut your leg. So no, that's my leg. I have a right to it. I was born with it, without realizing this leg is going to cause him to die.
Do you agree with this statement? I'm going to say two statements. You tell me if you agree with it or not, okay? One, Netanyahu and right-leaning politicians in Israel are more dangerous to Israel than Hamas and Hezbollah.
Yes.
Jewish extremism, right-leaning Jewish, ultra-Orthodox Jewish ideology is right now more harmful to Israel than Islam.
Right now, well, I'd say they're in close competition.
Okay.
They're both okay. I'll put it differently. I put them both in the same bag, and I'm not surprised that they found common language with the Islamists when they wanted to get them in the coalition. It doesn't surprise me one bit that they could actually find common grounds with them. For me, they're all the same. For me, they're both in the same basket.
Okay.
All the religious extremists, the same basket. So, I mean, if I may be given one more minute on that one. Look, we talk of both religions. They call them the Abrahamic religions, right? Which means they value Abraham. What can you expect from someone that values a person that is willing to slaughter his own son because he thinks God is talking to him? What can you expect from such religions? Right?
Perfect.
Every other person would put this guy in an asylum, but they are called the Abrahamic religions, right? So what can you expect from them? No wonder they can have a common language and common grounds, and no wonder they're all dangerous to the region. It's so clear, crystal clear to me.
All right. Anything positive?
Do you want to pick questions, because people are asking a lot of questions? I don't know. I apologize. I apologize. No, I could see questions before, and I apologize. Yes, it's true. Salam shalom. Yuval is right. Yeah, both extremes complement each other. Yes.
All right, guys. Right. If you want to ask any questions before we leave to Yuval, if you ask a question and we missed it, now's your chance to ask Yuval any questions. Right now, it's mostly comments.
Especially if we have the Palestinians here, Suha, or are there any other Palestinians or Muslims that want to, or Arabs that want to ask questions? I'd be happy to engage in some kind of a dialogue.
It's mostly comments like this.
Yeah, no, I saw a lot of Yuval is crazy and stuff, so I'm not going to comment on these ones. But I am crazy.
This is not that.
Let's see what we have here.
Here, AJ say thank you, Yuval, for joining us. Shalom.
Thank you very much.
It's mostly people have comments.
Okay, so maybe we'll give them just a minute or two to post a question if someone has, and then we'll call it a day.
All right.
So guys, 60 seconds. Okay.
Yeah, while we wait to see if there's any questions rather than just comments, I want to ask you: can you give us some source of hope and optimism?
Yes, I'm optimistic because I think there are enough, at least in Israel, there are enough sane and rationally thinking people, even in the right wing, that can see what Netanyahu is doing. And once Netanyahu and his corrupt government will go away, even a right-wing government will have to, that would think a bit more rationally. I think reason has a power of its own. Reason, the force of reason, has its own power. And people are sometimes forced to be reasonable, even if they don't want to be, and that keeps me optimistic. And I think there are enough sane Israelis that want the country to live more reasonably.
Okay, here's a question.
What is that? How is the sentiment outside the Middle East fueling the motives? Thank you very much. It's a very important question. Here's the thing. Here's the way I see it, Vasudev. I think whenever there is a conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, Israel is being held to a higher standard than any other country in fighting the Palestinians. And this fuels organizations like Hamas, because they know they have some kind of moral support from the democratic West. I think Israel many times is being stabbed in the back by the democratic West in favor of theocratical organizations like Hamas. And this fuels the tension because they know that at a certain point the West will step in and tell Israel, okay, you went too far, stop it, time to pull out. They know they would have this judge that will allow them to go to the ropes and recover. And this the judge being the Western world, the Western democracies. So the sentiments outside definitely fuel. And I'll just give another example. People say, why is Israel responding disproportionately? The idea that wars should be run proportionately is exactly what fuels the next war, because once one side is getting stronger than the other, the people who seek good proportion are strengthening the underdog. And then the underdog is getting stronger, and then they do the opposite. And this means wars can never end, because they will never get to a resolution. So
right.
these guys sorry.
Okay.
Another question, yes?
Yeah, we have more. Yeah, a couple of more questions. Before I get to the troll question, there's a nice comment here. Tarun Music TV saying, this has been an awesome conversation. Happy to know many perspectives.
Many perspectives. One, a Zionist and a Zionist. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. No, but we did represent other people's
counter. We did.
Troll saying for Yuval, okay, you want to read this?
Sorry, mark it again. Sorry, I missed it.
No, it's right here.
Adam, our channel recently discussed proposals for the federal solution of the conflict with Switzerland as the model. I'm very sorry, Adar, but the hostilities between Israelis and Palestinians, Switzerland did not join together made out of hostile groups. On the contrary, Switzerland was formed by various ethnic groups that had the exact same interests, and this is to get rid of their oppressors, and they had the same oppressor. That's not the case of Israelis and Arabs, regrettably. So I don't think the federation would work. I think all the tensions would remain, and all those, you have right-wing Israelis now that flirt with the idea of two states on one country, or one state solution. Guys, the tensions are going to stay there. You're going to put two animals, train them that one piece of meat is both theirs, they're going to fight. If you're going to put them in the same room, you don't want them to fight.
But don't use metaphors like that. Yes.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean that. I meant germs. No, sorry, I didn't mean that either.
No, stop it. No,
guys, I'm not going. No, I'll be careful. Sorry, algorithm. No.
Yeah,
okay, sure.
Don't hit the microphone as well. Your microphone is hitting. Guys, we don't mean to dehumanize any group of people. We're just
no. Sorry. That was an analog. I'm not going to use it again. I apologize.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. Anyway,
I know you don't mean it, but YouTube can't tell if that's what you mean. Okay, so anyways.
Of course. If you want to pick another question, I just don't see any.
Okay. Salam is saying, do you think that the Arab Israelis can be used as a bridge for a solution? We rarely spoke of them. We actually spoke about them today a lot, I think. We didn't.
Unfortunately, potentially yes. But look, the Arab Israelis are in a tragic situation, and this is why. Israelis view them sometimes as a fifth column. Palestinians view them as traitors, because they, as traitors sometimes, because they or not to be trusted. Why? They have Jewish friends. They come to terms. They appear as if they came to terms with the situation of Palestinian land being stolen by Israel and Israel existing. So they're always under a burden of proof, whether they speak to Arabs or whether they speak to Israelis. Also, their way of resolving it, unfortunately, now is becoming totally Palestinian in most cases, from what I've seen, and this is not helpful.
Right.
I think most Israeli Arabs today, when they have to present a position, they would support the Palestinian cause 100%, and that's not helping. I don't know. We don't have time to get into it. Otherwise, I would have.
Actually, Yuval, there's so many questions now. So
okay, so let's say. So I'm sorry. Right now, potentially yes, Salam, but unfortunately, right now, no. Loving Beast, Atheist Republic, do you think this conflict will bring atheism into a far better light in the region, or will they not see this is coming from the religions? Here's the thing: it's not only a religion. This particular conflict is not only fueled by religion. And the worst opponents of Israel, the most radical opponents of Israel 30 years ago, 40 years ago, were actually the Marxist organizations. So the Popular Front, the Democratic Front, they were secular organizations led by former Christians. Both of them were established by former Christians. So I don't think it would forward atheism. Of course, I would be very happy if it would, but I don't think that's going to be the case.
All right, next question.
I'm an atheist, yes. Do you think Palestinians and Israel can form a union? No, I don't think they can form a union. I've explained it before. There is too much hostility and not enough common grounds. European Union, let's say Germany and France has a history of rivalry, but they still have a lot of shared culture, which I think Israelis and Palestinians don't have.
Oh, here.
First name, okay. Hi guys, I'm Moroccan. Aslama. I want to know if ties normalization between Israel and UEA, Morocco, eventually, and others has an effect on this violence.
I think it's talking about the Abrahamic Accords. They're saying that, go on. It might?
Yeah, no. I think the normalization might affect calming down the situation in the sense of those normalizing countries stepping in and trying to moderate. So I think in that sense, it might have a calming effect. It might you might have the UEA coming to Netanyahu. Yeah, I think it might. I think it has a potential.
I think what it does is it could potentially make the Islamic Republic of Iran stronger because of the abandoning of the Arab states of the Palestinian cause. In that way, it would be a negative effect. And a positive effect, it might, if it wasn't for what happened in the past couple of days, what I was hoping, I know it was naive, but I was still hoping that it will encourage Arab Israelis to see it possible for them to be encourage them to be active as Israelis and fight for their rights in Israel, rather than completely refusing to be part of Israeli society because of the Palestinian cause. I think even if they do care about the Palestinians, in the short term, they should just focus on their own political strength within Israel before they ever go, and then maybe...
No, that's what the Islamists actually try to do. The Islamists were actually taking this route. This is why they were a better partner for Netanyahu, because they were more community-based and sectorial rather than all Palestinian.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Arab parties in Israel are Islamist. I'm hoping, we'll see. Another effect that it could have, actually, I don't even know if I can mention that one. That's bad. Anyways, let's go, Mark.
Okay, let's see who else. Mark Gamal. How to change the sentiment within the Arab world, at least in the sense of making it a conflict about land, but unfortunately, most Arabs are anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist. I don't know how to change that sentiment, but from what I understand in the Arab world, the way I see it, a lot of the sentiment is fueled by the government. If the government can have the press writing certain things and not write other things, and you can see in certain countries like Kuwait, a little bit Iraq, Morocco. You can see moderate voices, and I'm pretty sure we had the Moroccan commentator here. I'm pretty sure that the sentiment towards Jews in Morocco is not as negative as it is, for example, in places like Egypt or Syria. So it pretty much depends on the governments. How does this affect Israel and Middle East relations? How does this affect Israel and Middle East relations, which are warming up? We will have to wait and see. I think it won't affect too much, because
it could.
Part of one of the reasons the warming up happened was so that Israel would be an ally against Iran, and so they could get sophisticated weapons from the US, and they still need those weapons, and they're still afraid of Iran. So yes, so I think they would still keep their ties with Israel, because they are afraid of Iran, and they need the weapons, and they need the ally in the shape of Israel, in the form of Israel.
It does help push more anti-Israeli Arabs who are angry with their leaders to push them towards Islamic Republic's propaganda as their main guardian of the Palestinian cause. So that is what's happening. It also does hurt the standing of the Arab leaders, like with their own population, because a lot of these Arab leaders, they became closer to Israel, and a lot of people within these countries are not happy with them for that. And looking at what's happening in Palestine, the anti-Israeli sentiment might make people in these countries be even more upset with their own leaders. Things that the way that it could escalate really badly is if Netanyahu decides to highlight how much Iran is supporting Hamas, and then use that as a way to, if he ever feels more threatened to lose his power, he might take the increasing escalation with Iran route. And again, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but the most extreme scenario is to start full-on war as a result of this. Again, I'm not saying that it's going to happen. Yeah.
There is an underground war going on with Iran already, but
I know.
Yes. I want to answer Narumi, because he's asking the same question 4 times already, so I have to answer. Narumi, does Israel have electromagnetic, and cyber warfare capabilities? Yes, of course it has. This mode of warfare is stronger. I agree with you. Now forget the missiles of Hamas and Hezbollah. Okay, so obviously Israel is also using these capabilities. There is a reason why the centrifuges in Iran, the Iran nuclear facilities are breaking in Natanz, are breaking once in a while. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So does Yuval has Facebook and Twitter? We need to add his social media links in the description box. Thank you, Suha. So I'm on Facebook, but I don't. The content that I put on my Facebook account is mostly personal stuff. So it's not like I'm not that much of a thinker or a social activist. But
you're not a content creator.
But Suha, if you want to be my friend on Facebook, you're more than welcome to. If you're a friend of Armin, I'm on his friend list, and I'll be happy to befriend you.
Yeah. Aw, that's so sweet. Guys, no more questions.
I'm a sweet guy.
I'm just gonna okay, this one, there's too many questions coming, guys. I need to go. So
any idea how long until the political impasse in Israel might move forward? or to put it comically, how many elections will be needed? That's a fantastic question. That's like the woman who believed that the earth stands on turtles, and then they asked her what are these turtles standing on? She said there are turtles all the way down. So I think we'll have elections all the way down. I don't know how many elections we're going to have, unfortunately. Very good question.
All right. I'm going to end this here, because this was supposed to be 1 hour, but now we're like 1 hour and 40 minutes in.
The popular people that we are, yes.
All right, guys. But thank you so much, Yuval, for your time.
Thank you. I always enjoy coming. I always enjoy having these conversations.
Yes. And always your perspective is always appreciated here, and we'll bring Yuval back again.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, every time we bring Yuval is because something bad has happened. So hopefully we'll
Yeah.
bring you because something good has happened, and we want to talk about progress and things moving in the right direction, right?
Yeah, well, hopefully, let's hope there'll be one election that he's going to lose, and then please bring me then, and we're going to celebrate. Yes.
I'll bring.
So
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, Anna saying thank you. It was great to listen to you both. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Guys. All right, guys. Make sure you subscribe to our newsletter. Again, reminder that we give out our blasphemous art for free to all the people who are subscribed to our newsletter. And if you have seen any of our blasphemous art, you know that they're gorgeous. You know that they're sexy. You know that they're beautiful. And it's a crime that we're giving it away for free to all our newsletter subscribers. So make sure you subscribe to our newsletter. And we have new blasphemous art every week that we send to our newsletter subscribers. Subscribe and you get them. Okay, Nerumi is saying, good stream, Yuval.
Good stream. Thank you very much. It's very kind of you.
So this guy didn't.
No, that was exhausting. Well, I can't agree with Armin on everything, I guess.
It's okay.
My God.
I appreciate you being here, even though you don't like.
No, sorry, we've exhausted you, though. I mean, that's not.
Okay.
I apologize for that.
Soha is happy.
Yeah, thank you, Soha.
All right, guys. Thank you. Bye.
See you guys.